Part 3: The Lionheart and the Last Charge. After the death of the young king, I felt lost for the first time in many years. For so long, my purpose had been clear. I had followed my lord across kingdoms, fought his enemies, shared his victories, and endured his failures. Suddenly, that chapter of my life was over. Men who spend years carrying a sword often believe they are prepared for anything, yet nothing prepares you for watching someone you served faithfully disappear from the world. For a time, I wandered through uncertainty, wondering where fate intended to lead me next. The answer arrived in the form of another prince. His name was Richard. History would remember him as Richard the Lionheart. Even before he became king, stories surrounded him. He was fearless in battle, ambitious to a fault, and possessed a reputation that inspired both admiration and fear. Unlike many nobles who preferred issuing commands from safety, Richard enjoyed fighting alongside his men. He understood warfare, respected courage, and demanded excellence from those around him. When I entered his service, I quickly realized I was dealing with a very different kind of leader. The young king had possessed charm. Richard possessed intensity. When he entered a room, men paid attention. When he entered a battlefield, they remembered him. The years that followed were filled with conflict. Rebellions erupted. Alliances shifted. Castles changed hands. France and England remained locked in endless struggles for power. Wherever opportunity for battle appeared, Richard seemed drawn toward it, like iron toward a magnet. More than once, I watched him charge into situations that would have terrified lesser men. His courage bordered on recklessness, yet it inspired extraordinary loyalty among his followers. One encounter during those years became famous throughout Europe. Richard had rebelled against his father, King Henry II, and conflict raged across the countryside. During one engagement, I found myself facing Richard directly on the battlefield. The fighting was chaotic, with cavalry charging through clouds of dust, while infantry struggled to maintain formation. Amid the confusion, I spotted Richard. For a brief moment, I had a clear opportunity. A single strike might have ended his life and altered the course of history. Instead, I killed his horse. The animal collapsed beneath him, while the prince escaped unharmed. Years later, Richard would remember the incident. Rather than holding resentment, he respected the choice. Perhaps he recognized that a man who could show restraint during battle might be trusted afterward. Whatever his reasoning, the moment helped forge a relationship that would shape the rest of my life. The war between Henry and his sons continued to tear apart the kingdom. Fathers fought sons. Brothers betrayed brothers. Noblemen shifted loyalties whenever advantage presented itself. Those years taught me that politics could be far more dangerous than battle. A sword at least announces its intentions. A smiling nobleman often does not. I watched powerful lords swear sacred oaths in the morning, only to abandon them by sunset. Trust became a rare commodity. Yet amid all the uncertainty, Richard remained consistent. He preferred action over hesitation and courage over caution. If a castle needed taking, he attacked. If an enemy challenged him, he answered. If danger appeared, he rode directly toward it. Such qualities made him difficult to oppose and impossible to ignore. When Richard eventually became king, England gained one of the most famous warriors in history. Yet almost immediately, his attention turned eastward. News from the Holy Land had shaken Christendom. Jerusalem had fallen to the armies of Saladin, and calls for a new crusade echoed throughout Europe. Kings, nobles, and knights prepared for a journey unlike anything most had ever imagined. I did not accompany Richard on the crusade itself, but the stories that returned were astonishing. Merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and priests carried tales across Europe. Around countless campfires, I listened to men describe battles fought beneath scorching desert suns and sieges against mighty cities whose names sounded almost mythical. Again and again, one name dominated every story: Richard. Some claimed he fought like 10 men. Others insisted entire armies found courage merely by seeing his banner. As with all legends, some tales were surely exaggerated, but even the truth was remarkable. Richard had become more than a king. He had become a symbol. Few rulers achieved that distinction. The crusade taught Europe many lessons. Men who had never traveled beyond their local villages suddenly crossed seas and deserts. They encountered different languages, customs, faiths, and cultures. Some returned wiser, others returned broken. Many never returned at all. War always demands payment. The bill simply arrives later. While Richard pursued glory abroad, England faced dangers at home. Castles required defence, lands required management. Rival nobles watched for opportunities. Maintaining order demanded experienced men capable of leadership. Those years taught me that victory requires more than swords. A knight may win a duel, but kingdoms survive through diplomacy, patience, supplies, and wise governance. As I matured, I found myself increasingly responsible for matters beyond the battlefield. I settled disputes, managed estates, negotiated agreements, advised powerful men. The lessons learned during those years would prove invaluable later. Then came another tragedy. Richard the Lionheart, the warrior king who seemed almost invincible, died from a wound received during a siege in France. Once again, I watched a remarkable leader disappear. Once again, the kingdom faced uncertainty. Crowns pass from one ruler to another, but every transition invites danger. Ambitious men see opportunity where others see grief. The throne passed to King John. History has judged John harshly, and not without reason. He possessed intelligence, but lacked many of the qualities that inspire loyalty. Suspicion followed him everywhere. Trust rarely lasted. Conflicts multiplied beneath his rule. Noblemen who had once supported the crown began questioning their allegiance. Tensions spread across England until the kingdom seemed ready to fracture. By this point, I was no longer the young warrior who had dazzled crowds at tournaments. Grey hairs appeared in my beard. Old injuries lingered. Younger knights emerged seeking glory just as I once had. Yet experience carries a value that youth often underestimates. I had spent decades surviving wars, rebellions, betrayals, and political storms. That knowledge proved invaluable during the troubled years ahead. Eventually, the conflict between King John and his barons exploded into open rebellion. The crisis became so severe that the king was forced to accept a document that would echo through history, the Magna Carta. Though few understood its long-term significance at the time, it represented a major attempt to limit royal power and protect certain rights. Peace, however, remained elusive. The kingdom continued sliding toward chaos. When King John died in 1216, England faced one of the most dangerous moments in its history. A foreign prince sought the English crown. Rebel barons controlled large territories. Civil war threatened to consume everything. The new king, Henry III, was only a child. Many believed the monarchy itself might collapse. By then, I was an old man. Most warriors my age had long since retired. Many were already dead. Yet fate had one final task waiting for me. I was appointed protector of the young king and guardian of the realm. The responsibility was immense. England stood on the edge of disaster. If we failed, the crown could be lost forever. Every decision mattered. Every alliance mattered. Every battle mattered. Despite my age, I returned to the saddle. The campaign that followed led toward one final confrontation, the Battle of Lincoln in 1217. Even now, I can still remember the morning of that battle. A cold mist hung over the city, while dawn slowly brightened the horizon. Armor buckles rattled softly, horses stamped their feet, men checked weapons and whispered prayers. Some were veterans, many were not. I looked across their faces and saw reflections of my younger self. Ambitious young knights eager to prove themselves. Nervous squires trying to appear brave. Hardened soldiers who understood exactly how dangerous the day would be. They looked at me differently than men once had, not as a tournament champion, not as a rival, but as an old survivor. Perhaps that is the highest compliment a warrior can receive. The enemy held strong positions inside Lincoln. Their confidence was high. Many believed victory already belonged to them. I intended to prove otherwise. When the attack began, the city erupted into chaos. Trumpets sounded, banners advanced, arrows hissed overhead like angry insects. The narrow streets became killing grounds where every corner concealed danger. Unlike open battlefields where cavalry could maneuver freely, Lincoln became a maze of stone, noise, and confusion. Horses struggled for space. Infantry crowded together. Commands vanished beneath the roar of combat. Men fought desperately for every step forward. Several times the fighting became so close there was barely room to swing a sword. Dust filled the air. Steel clashed against steel. The noise was deafening. Yet experience matters. While younger warriors focused on individual opponents, I searched constantly for weaknesses. Battles are rarely won through strength alone. They are won through timing. Eventually, I saw opportunity. Enemy formations had begun separating. Communication broke down. Small cracks appeared in their lines. I ordered an aggressive advance. The response was immediate. Our men surged forward with renewed determination. Momentum shifted. Confidence abandoned the enemy ranks. Panic spread. Their formations collapsed. Soldiers who moments earlier had fought stubbornly now searched desperately for escape. The streets filled with fleeing men. The outcome was decided. By the end of the day, Lincoln belonged to us. The victory echoed throughout England. More importantly, it saved the crown of young Henry III. The kingdom had stood on the edge of destruction. Now it possessed hope once again. As celebrations erupted around me, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not pride, relief. For decades I had carried responsibilities that often seemed endless. Kings had come and gone. Wars had begun and ended. Friends had fallen. Rivals had disappeared. Yet somehow I remained. Perhaps this final victory was not simply about saving a kingdom. Perhaps it was proof that every hardship I had endured served a purpose. The frightened hostage, the tournament champion, the royal servant, the old warrior, all of them had been leading toward this moment. When peace finally returned, I knew my own journey was nearing its end. I had survived more battles than I could count. I had served multiple kings. I had crossed Europe, fought famous warriors, endured betrayals, and witnessed history unfold around me. The frightened child who once waited for execution had somehow become one of the most respected men in England. As I sit beside this fire and reflect upon those years, I realize that people often misunderstand knighthood. They imagine shining armor, heroic charges, and glorious victories. Those things exist, but they are only part of the story. True knighthood is loyalty when betrayal would be easier. It is courage when fear feels overwhelming. It is standing firm when everyone else retreats. It is honoring your word even when doing so costs you dearly. That is what I tried to do throughout my life. Whether I succeeded is for others to decide. But if my story proves anything, it is this. A frightened child can become a legend, not because he was born special, not because fate guaranteed success, but because every time life knocked him into the mud, he found the strength to stand up again.